host, Nick Toka. Today is May 6, 2025, episode 111, and a Bitcoin, she is a pumping, baby, up a couple percent, almost 3% right now, after Trump announced that China and US are coming up with some trade negotiations once again instead of battling it out. So we're going to definitely deep dive into that in a little bit. We are also going to talk about Strike, who launches BTC-Backed loans. It's about time. Available throughout the US now. All of a sudden, just like that, that's how this stuff's going to go down, folks. Yesterday, it wouldn't have happened. Today, it's a new thing and alive and well. We'll talk about all these aspects of the biddy and so much more on today's show. Welcome, folks, to CryptoNews Global, and we see the biddy is up almost 3%. Let's get right into some technical analysis. I'm excited about this because we should and may be seeing the next leg up for the biddy. Up 2.8% as we speak, 97,473. Ethereum up 1.5%, 1844. Solana up 2%, $148. XRP up 1.5%, $2.16. Doge up 1.7%, 17 cents. And Sui up 1.5%, $3.42. Crypto bubbles. Let's check out the hour. Almost everything is up for the hour, and we won't get much into that. But for the day, we've got Litecoin up 11%, Pudgy Penguins up 9%, WorldCoin up 8.5%, Fetch up 7%, about 80-something% in the green for the day. Zooming out to the week is a bit of the opposite. We see about 70% in the red for the week, but Hype is up 14%. Zcash is up 11%. Dex up 18%. And there's a few more, including 4 up 20% right now for the week. And zooming out to the monthly, every single thing except IP and Atom in the green for the month. Pudgy Penguins up 191%, Virtual up 215%, Hype up 100%, Jasmy up 67%, Fetch 83%, Fartcoin 137%. Taking a look at the total hash rate, we see the hash rate in blue and the market price of the Bitcoin in black, and where we left off last time was the hash rate was just starting to make a turn and go positive again. As we've said many times, the hash rate, the Bitcoin price follows the hash rate, and we see a huge jump. We're almost at the maximum we have ever seen, which is 909 billion terahashes currently, and the all-time high is 924 billion terahashes, so getting there. The M2 global money supply, again, we see the Bitcoin price and the M2 money supply follow each other pretty closely. Let's zoom in a little bit to see where this lies, and we can kind of see a very, very close correlation, about 60 to 90 days delayed. The experts say 60 days, but when looking at it live here, it's looking more like 90 days. But we do see this head and shoulders pattern right here, and then in the Bitcoin price we see the head and shoulders pattern again, then a jump in the M2 money supply, and we see that same jump in the BITI. Current market cap for Bitcoin is $1.93 trillion, Ethereum $222 billion, XRP $126 billion, Solana $77 billion, Doge $25 billion, Cardano $24 billion, Tron $23 billion, and Sui $11 billion, Chainlink $9 billion, and Avalanche $8.5 billion. Let's go all the way down to Avalanche number 13. I'm going to refresh this because the price has actually changed in the past hour even. Total market cap of all crypto, just under $3 trillion, 2.96 trillion, with Bitcoin holding 65.25% of that, Ethereum 7.5%, XRP 4.25% of that. Crypto Fear and Greed Index puts us in a 67 in greed right now. Yesterday it was a 59 in neutral. Last week is a 56 in neutral as well. Feel free to post any comments or thoughts in the live chat, folks. I'm always looking over there and checking it out. Currently, the price, there's 1,072 days left until next BitcoinHalving 2028, which equals to 154,000 blocks left to mine until that point. Total assets by market cap, we've got gold at 22.6 trillion, Microsoft 3.2 trillion, Apple 2.9 trillion, Nvidia 2.7 trillion, Google 2 trillion, Amazon 1.97 trillion, and there's the BITI number 7, 1.93 trillion. Silver behind the Bitcoin, 1.875 trillion. Saudi Aramco left in the dust now by the Bitcoin at 1.6 trillion, and fuckbook at 1.5 trillion bucks. You can currently get 1,025 satoshis for one fiat US dollar, and the current US national debt sits at 36 trillion 817 billion, or 107,562 per US citizen, which equals also to 323,050 per U.S. taxpayer. When looking at the savings, Doge is now crossed the $400 billion mark, $401 billion in savings, and that equals to 3,573 per U.S. taxpayer in savings. Excuse me. Lots of savings going on, folks. What are we into? May, and it was January, so February, March, April, May. So we'll call it 4 months since Trump's inauguration, and really not much happened. So I don't know when Doge started, but pretty close to that. So we'll call it 4 months, even though it's not. Really, we should call it 3.5 months. So let's divide 1 year by 3.5. So that's 3.43, 3.43 times 3573. According to this, Doge is saving each taxpayer $12,500 a year if we average it out through the year. So not bad, folks. Stop bashing those people. You're listening to too much CNN. What's going to end up happening is, everybody's bashing on Trump with the tariffs. They're bashing on Elon with the savings. I don't get it. What's going to end up happening in 2 years is the economy is going to start booming. Tariff bullshit is going to be done with. There's going to be great relationships with China, with Canada, Mexico, Europe, all these new lovely trade deals, and everybody's going to forget about this crap because people have bad memories. The only people that don't have bad memories is CNN, where they're going to just keep regurgitating the same crap over and over for, until they're back in power, and then they're going to have smiles on their face and stop talking about all the corruption that the Democrats were doing, and that's only going to be found out during the next Republican administration. So I don't know what to say. Be happy. Doge saved you $3,573 in about 3 months. So, a couple ways to look at it. Did you really lose that much in the stock market? Are the people who are losing money in the stock market, is it you? Is it? Because it seems to me the people that are complaining about the stock market are the billionaires who don't need the money anyway. And the common folk, they should be happier with the savings of $3,500 in 3 months. Anyhow, I'm not going to deep dive into that at all. Let's get right into our stories, which are more important because we've got the Bitcoin payment company Strike. They have now launched BTC-Backed loans, baby. BTC-based payment company Strike is allowing customers to get loans using the top currency as collateral. And why not? Everybody wants your Bitcoin. Payment service Bitcoin-backed loans are now available for Strike's American customers. The payment app CEO announced Tuesday. Strike boss Jack Mallers posted a video on X explaining the new service. Customers from a total of 26 U.S. states are eligible to secure loans starting from between $75,000 to $100,000, depending on the state, the firm's website says. Mallers says that the service will soon be available for other regions, including Europe. Wow. Here, let's check out the vid.
Hello! Good morning, Bitcoin. Today is the day we have officially launched Strike Lending.
This is him?
Borrow fiat, keep your Bitcoin.
He's 10 years old.
Strike, we have embarked on the mission to help our customers unlock their Bitcoin wealth without having to sell the Bitcoin, without having to incur a taxable event. Bitcoin is nearly a $2 trillion asset at this point. That means there's been close to $2 trillion of wealth created over the last 15 years of people simply buying Bitcoin. And those people, those Bitcoiners, want access to that wealth without having to part with the Bitcoin, without having to incur a taxable event. How do I know this? Well, because every time you guys tweet at me, product requests, feedback on the product, feedback on the company, I keep them, I analyze them, I share them with the team. I've mentioned we at Strike try and be the most.
This is Jack Mallers?
Bitcoin company.
I had no idea.
Take the ego out of building products for people. Who knows what our customers want better than our customers? Trick question. Nobody. And so you guys have been asking for this feature over and over and over and over again.
Smart.
It makes a lot of sense. This is how the real estate market has been built. This is how society has been built. People buy and invest in assets that appreciate against a debasing dollar, and they're able to borrow against these assets to finance starting a new business, to finance an emergency medical situation, to finance buying a new home. Of course, don't part with your assets. If you can, and you can responsibly do it, you borrow against your assets. And our customers are saying, why is Bitcoin different? Why is the only way I can access my Bitcoin wealth by selling the Bitcoin? And it's a good question, and Bitcoin shouldn't be different. And today on Strike, it isn't different. You can borrow against your Bitcoin. So let's get into it. As you guys know, every time we have an announcement, I'm going to make a video. I'm going to record myself very authentically, just walking through the product and allow you guys to ask questions, make comments. I read all of the tweets, obviously, and I want to make sure I'm available and we as a company are transparent with you guys on what we're doing and why we're doing what we're doing. So,
wow. I didn't realize he was that young. But there he is, broadcasting directly from what looks to be his empty closet. Billionaire at the ripe age of, I don't know how old he actually is, but he looks, about 16. But good on them, and they are now offering Bitcoin-backed loans. He actually seems like a pretty genuine, straight-up kind of guy, despite his young years. So, you want a Bitcoin loan? You got your Bitcoin loan, America. You shouldn't have to sell the best performing asset in human history to access cash, said Mallers. Now you don't have to. The idea is that Strike customers will be able to receive loans with at least 12% APR using Bitcoin as collateral. Individuals and companies seeking larger loans over $2 million will also be eligible when assessed, Mahler's says. Strike is a digital payments company that allows users to send, receive, and trade the biggest cryptocurrency. Mahler's is also the CEO of 21, a new Bitcoin treasury company that will be formed via SPAC merger with backing from Tether, Bitfinex, Cantor Fitzgerald, and SoftBank. Strike was El Salvador's partner for its Bitcoin project, helping install the infrastructure for Salvadorians to spend their cryptocurrency. El Salvador in 2021 became the first country to make accepting Bitcoin legal tender. It has since scrapped the law following an International Monetary Fund. Of course, the IMF fucked them, right? But, they're not actually listening to the IMF. Asked to roll back the policy under a $1.4 billion loan agreement. However, the country's president, Nayib Bukele, is continuing to buy up the asset. Yeah, I mean, basically, Bukele's like, sure, we'll take your loan. Sure, we'll reverse our policies. And then publicly they reverse their policies. But what's actually happening is he's smartly using the idiot IMF $1.4 billion loan against them. He's like, sure, we'll take your loan. Okay, yeah, we'll change our policies. And instead they took the $1.4 billion loan and they're buying the Bitcoin with them. Brilliant, right? The IMF should keep their freaking mouth shut. All they're trying to do is slow down the adoption of Bitcoin because they see that their old-fashioned ways, the IMF, aren't going to hold water for much longer, and they're going to see that the de-dollarization is going to start happening. I think it already has started happening, and it's an agency that I don't know if can survive. These big agencies, folks, they care more about keeping their jobs and keeping people under control than they do about the actual people. We all know that. Now these, IMF and other institutions around the world are starting to get exposed. So, there was a time when people didn't know what the Fed was, the Federal Reserve. They thought, the Federal Reserve is the government, but no, it's not actually a government organization. It's a completely separate organization, and created, why? To control people through their money printing. They can print as much money as they want, devalue your currency, and make you broke, basically, and keep you broke, and that's the way they want it. And along comes Bitcoin, and Satoshi must have known this way ahead of the curve, and this is a huge threat to fiat currency around the world, and I think lots of countries are going to be flocking to Bitcoin. And they already have, I think, quietly, and we'll see a lot more. And when they publicly come out with this, I mean, the States has already created this Bitcoin strategic reserve, right? This was not a secret. They what I'm waiting for is for them to say, okay, we just bought 1 million Bitcoin. Then you're going to see the price skyrocket. But I think everybody's keeping it on the low, because if they come out and announce it, the Bitcoin price is going to jump up abruptly, and then they won't be able to buy a bit more Bitcoin at the lower price. Now, we have seen today that the BTC is going up in price. We're up to $97,500 as we speak, and it's because China confirms a restart of U.S. trade talk deals. Bitcoin prices climbed sharply to $97,500 following confirmation that China and the United States will resume formal trade negotiations this week. This marks the first direct engagement between both governments since Trump returned to office in January and introduced new tariffs on Chinese goods. Crypto markets responded immediately after the announcement. Bitcoin price rose by more than $2,500 within $1,700 within 10 minutes, while other cryptocurrencies also recorded gains. XRP has increased by 1% to $2.15. Cardano rose $3. to 67 cents, and Doge climbed 1.5% to 17 cents. Analysts attributed the rise to the growing investor confidence that tensions between the two economic powers may ease. China confirms a restart of U.S. trade talks. U.S. and China trade officials are set to meet in Switzerland later this week. The discussions aim to reopen formal economic dialogue after months of growing tariff disputes. Both nations realized official statements confirming this meeting. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer will lead the American delegation. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs announced that Vice Premier He Lifeng will represent Beijing. He serves as the lead official for China-U.S. trade relations. The Vice Premier will hold a meeting with the U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent to discuss the trade issues, said a spokesman from China's Foreign Ministry. The U.S. Trade Representative Office also confirmed that Greer will meet his Chinese counterpart to continue discussions on the trade-related matters. Yeah, so if the trade talk and the trade fears and the trade war, as the media called it, which was not a war at all, it was more like a trade negotiation, if that tanked the markets, then we should see that this is going to start doing the opposite. So let me actually go into, let's see what we've got. The Nikkei, it actually shows that the Nikkei is down, opens down, which is strange, considering this news. So, is it really, does it have that much to do with trade tariffs then? The Hang Seng, Hong Kong is up 2%, which obviously literally just opened. We got the opening here up a couple percent as we speak, right off the hop. Likely the Nikkei is going to follow. Interesting that the Nikkei is down. It's even. It's down 0.12%. The Hong Kong market has now jumped even more. It's up almost 2% for the day, and I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up 4, 5, 7% just on this news. And the S&P and the Dow and the NYSE and the Nasdaq, I won't be surprised if these things climb substantially based on this news. Hopefully nobody out there dumped their stocks on the low. That's not what smart people do. Smart people hold, and smart people, in fact, buy the dip. That's what we do with the biddy. I just bought the dip again yesterday or the day before, knowing that there's going to be interest rate talks with Jerome Powell. I'm pretty sure it's toward the end of this week. And I am kind of expecting the rates to drop because they are supposed to drop twice this year, 0.25%. And once that happens, then we're going to see a big jump also in the Bitcoin. Furthermore, the interest rates, we've talked about this quite a bit, they have to come down substantially, because if they don't, this is the year where the U.S. is going to be refinancing approximately just under $10 trillion worth of U.S. debt. So 9.6 trillion out of their $36 trillion debt. So definitely over a quarter of their debt needs to be refinanced this year. So it's the equivalent of refinancing your home, right? You're in a 5-year term, let's say, and your 5-year term is up, and you have to refinance your loan. If the interest rate's high, then you're going to refinance at a higher rate. If the interest rate is lower, you're going to refinance at a low rate. Normally what you do, if the interest rate's high, well, you're only going to refinance that for 1 year, for example, instead of going for this long 5-year or more term. So imagine having to refinance $10 trillion bucks. So last year, $1 trillion in interest was paid out by the U.S. just on their debt. So that's more than their defense spending for the entire year. And let's get back into this, which gives us a good indicator on where some of the U.S. money goes. So we said $1 trillion, and here we go, interest on debt, right? 1,022 billion. Yep. And climbing like a mofo, right? And then here we have the defense spending, $900 billion. The only bigger expenditure, it seems, right now is Social Security. They're spending 1.5 trillion, and Medicare 1.6.5 trillion. If we go a little further here, U.S. total interest paid, $5.5 trillion just in interest. And the U.S. total debt, see, we talk about the U.S. national debt every day, but we haven't really gone down here. U.S. national total debt, $103 trillion. Yeah. So, insanity, right? See these brown things here? These are new. This didn't exist before. So we've got the Doge clock, the savings, and then we've got the DeFi bankless future. So interesting how decentralized finance is going positive and traditional fiat is going the opposite way. I guess they have it separated here, red, brown, but ultimately big trouble. And the M2 money supply, just looking at the US portion, we see the numbers are climbing substantially every day, every moment, every minute of the day. This is going up. Look at this. $100 million in, 100,000 every about 5 seconds. 1, 2, let me count it again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Every 4 seconds, the money supply goes up by 100,000 US dollars. Every 4 seconds. So imagine how devalued your money is. I was going to cut this show short right here, but I want to show one more thing, and just to put that into perspective in terms of where your money's going and how you're being fucked right up the kazoo here, right? So let's just bring up let's change our canvas size here. Let's go width, we'll say 2,500. All right, so let's change the color. Fine. All right, now we've got something to work with. So let's now use this here as the total money supply. So let's call this white portion I'm going to draw here the total money supply right now, let's say, right? Fill that in. Okay, so this here would be your little slice of the pie. This is how much money one individual might have. I know it's not, to scale here, but let's say this is your cut. This is what you own in terms of money. This is the total money supply. So let's actually, I don't want you to get confused by the height is not what we're looking at here. The width is what we're looking at, okay? So your total piece of the pie, how much money you have, is this vertical line here, okay? Now, the total money supply would be this horizontal line. So as they print more money, let's say they double the money supply, Now, what happened to your piece of the pie? It's less, isn't it? It's basically less of the total supply, so it's worth about half as much. So now let's do what they're actually doing, governments around the world, and let's really expand this so you can get a good idea of how you're completely screwed here. So now the total money supply expands to this white line going all the way across the screen. Your little piece of the pie still hasn't changed. Your, this tiny little sliver, and this tiny little sliver used to be substantial. This used to be the whole money supply right here, right? You had something going on. Now you got nothing going on because they've expanded the fuck out of this thing, and your little piece of the pie is now this skinny little thing over here, which used to be, well, I'd like to say 1% of the total money supply, but I know it's not. But you get the point here. It was worth a lot more when there wasn't as much money. So when they talk about inflation and how is inflation happening and why inflation this and inflation that, this is inflation, folks. 100%. This is how inflation occurs, and nobody tells you that part, do they? Right? So we're all pretty much being screwed. They're only now coming out and saying, oh yeah, money printing causes inflation. Now you hear it occasionally on, mainstream media, hardly ever, right? You hear it from Republicans. You're never going to hear that from Democrats. They're just going to print and print and print, and they don't give a crap about how much money how much inflation's going up. Now, Bitcoin, on the other hand, is the complete opposite. It's never going to have more supply. It's set to 21 million. Currently, there's 20 million that has been created. So there's only going to be 1 million more. Even gold has relative scarcity, we'll call it, right? Every year they find another approximately 1.5 to 2% more gold. Bitcoin, that's it. Once this 21 million is printed, and by 2032, I believe it is, 99% of all the Bitcoin is going to be already created, and there's only going to be 1% more until the year 2140, where the last Bitcoin is created. So it's already scarce, right? So that gives you an idea. Whereas Bitcoin is going to hold its purchasing power, it's not going to change. In fact, it's going to increase, because as they print more fiat money, that's just going to automatically increase the value of Bitcoin. So if there's twice as much money as there was before, well then technically the Bitcoin should be twice the value of what it is now, because even if the Bitcoin price doesn't change, the fiat money is changing. So the reduction in fiat is equally, on the other hand, an increase in the biddy. Hopefully this helps understand the debasement of money, which is really the technical term for it. In fact, we just call it the money printer, and when the money printer goes brrrr, we all get screwed. And our parents were working hard. They had no idea about this stuff unless you were in finance, or unless you were well versed in finance. And we try and talk about financial literacy on the show, folks. We don't want the banks taking our interest. We don't want these mortgages with, even a low interest rate. If you buy a place for 200 grand and you mortgage it over 25 years, you're basically paying 400 grand for your house. So you want as little to deal with the banks and as little as possible to deal with loans. And certainly, you don't want to deal with credit cards. The banks are rich by making everyone poor. Remember that. So the faster you can get your reliance off of the banks, the better off you're going to be. let's say you've got a bitty, or let's say you've got a couple Bitcoin, and you're lucky you got in early, right? And the Bitcoin in 2028, 2029, and you know, some people even say this cycle. So let's say when the Bitcoin goes to $1 million, to do the math even better. So let's say you've got 5 Bitcoin, the price goes to $2 million, let's say by 2029. So you got $10 million, right? At that point, maybe holding onto your Bitcoin is a good idea, but you have to start considering becoming a lender, right? This is what the rich folks are doing. If you put your money in the bank and take advantage of them instead of them taking advantage of you, right? You put your money in the bank at 4% interest. That's $400,000 a year if you got 10 million bucks. So that should be everybody's goal, to become a lender, right? Once you make it big, yes, of course, you know, number one rule in Bitcoin, never sell your Bitcoin. Let's face it, right? However, you also need to live. And depending on how the rules change in the future with Bitcoin, ideally, you never do have to sell your Bitcoin. In fact, we see, look, Jack Mahler's company, we just looked at that a couple of minutes ago, Bitcoin-backed loans, right? So depending on what kind of interest rate, and I think I saw 12%, which is fucking fucked up if that's the case. Then he's just like reaming you like the banks are if that's the case. But if it was reasonable, let's say it was a 4% loan and you put up a Bitcoin against it, $100,000, you buy a house for $100,000. 5 years later, the Bitcoin is now, you know, $1 million a coin. Well, you pay back your loan and you've got your Bitcoin back worth $900,000. Your $1 million that the Bitcoin's worth minus the $100,000 plus whatever interest, and you're sitting pretty. This conceptually is how it should work. So something to look forward to. I do anticipate, if you guys have never read the Bitcoin Standard, and it's in the comments, please take a look at it. I've got quite a few really good books that you should read or listen to. They're free, right? I've got a YouTube link to all of them, which is completely free to listen to. I've got the author's site out of respect, like, you know, if you want to buy the book. And I also have the Amazon site for all these if you want to buy the audiobook. But again, you don't need to, right? I've got the YouTube link. Just listen to this thing in the car. Listen to these in the car. Instead of listening to, you know, whatever your regular playlist is, go with some financial literacy. And by the end of getting through a few of these books, because ultimately, look, you're driving anyway, you can do two things at once: drive and expand your mind. I've got excellent books in here, and if you go through all of these one by one, by the end of it, you will have enough financial literacy knowledge of the system and knowledge of how to make a buck and save a buck, and the entire ideology of how the banking system has effectively made everybody poor just so they could become rich. You'll see what kind of grip they have on society. So if you can get yourself to a point where you have this financial literacy, you're going to go a long way, and you will start making your money. You will start turning things around. And if you already have a fair amount of money, you're going to take that and make even more money out of it. And it's not by leeching off of frickin' society the way the banks and the royals and, you know, everybody high up does it. The prime ministers, you name it, they're all taking advantage. Like the guy in Canada, Dick Trudeau, his net worth when he became prime minister was $10 million. By the time he left office, which was, you know, 3-4 months ago, so originally 10 million, by the time he left office, it was $300 million, his net worth. So talk about taking advantage of, the good folks, right? Complete BS. Let's see what you guys are saying in the comments here. Video amazing. Oh, awesome. Get rich pathways. Thank you. The quality's top notch and I really enjoyed watching it. Wishing your channel more and more success, my friend. Thank you so much, Get Rich Pathways. Melissa, I need help, please. I deposited $3,800 in my OKX wallet. Was logged out. How should I log in? Here's my free. Okay, so that one is, spam, right? You're not going to give your seed phrase to a complete stranger. And like Melissa, and the icon looks like some creepy Cardano holder dude. Yeah. So all 12 months to the Hamburglar at 12%. I think he's referring to the Jack Muller loans at 12%. Yeah. So getting back to these books, folks, I highly recommend you go through them. You can do this without wasting your own time. Do this while you're doing something else. You're then doing two things at once. You're really then making your time important, right? So I've got in the comments the Bitcoin Standard, a great book in understanding not only Bitcoin, but the history of money, how money was initially created, what types of currencies historically existed, why they existed, where they existed, and that's really the first few chapters. That's all it's talking about. They don't even talk about the Bitcoin until, maybe halfway through the book. And then this Saifedean Ammous, the author of the Bitcoin Standard, really gives people a great idea of where this is going to go one day. Bitcoin being the dominant currency worldwide and the reserve currency for all banks. And they also talk about the security of it all. And, they also go through people's concerns, what could happen with Bitcoin, and, the concerns about forking, the concerns about the demise of Bitcoin. And they smartly go through all those points very objectively. They say, okay, this could fail, and this is the only way it could fail. And effectively, they push all the points against failure, and they give you confidence that this thing is going to last forever, until it gets to the point where nobody cares about Bitcoin anymore because there's nobody around to even give a shit. So very good book, good read, and I would suggest that being the first book you read. Good morning, Billy Grande. Let's give some hearts to these folks out here, and some cheers and some 100s. Good people on my channel. Thanks for joining in. Much appreciated, and I appreciate these comments fully. The next book I've got in this list, and it's going to be in the comments. I leave it in there at all times with the YouTube links, with the Amazon links. I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. What a fucking masterpiece this is, okay? Done in a funny, modern way. It's a pretty new book, but it's brilliant, and it's going to go through all the basics of not getting reamed by the banks and taking money back where it belongs, and that's in your pocket, and how to make money even if you're in debt, how to get out of debt step by step. He really goes through this thing step by step by step, and it's quite good. I'd highly recommend it. That's why I've got it as my number 2 book. The Millionaire Fast Lane by M.J. DeMarco, another brilliant book. This guy was basically eating noodles out of a carton down to like a couple $100 left in his account, couldn't pay the rent, and he finally turned things around by creating his own company, and now he's got 3 Lamborghinis. He lives up on the hill in a 15-room mansion. He said, I'll be honest, I don't visit some of the rooms in my house for weeks or months. This house is too big, and so on and so on. But he really goes through how to give yourself the mindset and change your mindset for the better to make yourself rich and not follow the crowd of people that are sitting on the side doing jack all with their lives. This guy's got it right. I love this book, The Fastlane Millionaire. The Psychology of Money, another book by Morgan Housel. And this, again, is 100% about psychology and how to avoid the pitfalls and traps that the banks and society have you brainwashed under in order to really gain control of your finances and make yourself rich. It's an excellent, excellent book, Psychology of Money. And I also have Rich Dad, Poor Dad in there. How can you not love Robert Kiyosaki? I've got other great books too, better than the Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I mean, it's the only reason I have it on my list is because everybody knows it, and maybe it's worth a read. But he really only is talking about how to avoid the tax man. That's the number one thing he talks about, is avoiding the tax man, and he's bang on with that. So it is important in that respect. And I like Robert Kiyosaki. He's a great outspoken guy. He's got his own podcast thing now too, and he's been he doesn't hold cash. He basically makes cash so he can buy gold, silver, and Bitcoin. And he's been doing that since, I think, 1970 or mid-1960s. Former Army guy. I think he was in the Navy. And seemingly an all-around good guy. But those books, I would say in that order. I wouldn't, even though the Kiyosaki book is #1 bestseller of all time, I would not put it as the #1 book at all. I would go with the Bitcoin Standard, then I Will Teach You to Be Rich. The Millionaire Fastlane might be my favorite of all of them. Psychology of Money, super important. Go through those books, folks. Get yourself some financial literacy. Watch shows like mine. Hopefully these things help you out. And let's stop giving our money to the banks. And, like Billy Grande there. Now, he's got the right mind, right? Grande. He's doing shit himself. I could tell just by that name. So shout out to everybody in the live chat. Thanks for joining. Remember, everybody, that money is abundant. Money is everywhere. There's about $900 trillion in the world. So go out there and get your share. It's time that's scarce, so spend your time wisely. As mentioned, do 2 things at once while you're driving. Get these audiobooks going, right? Get your mind expanded, learn about money. Spend less money than what you earn always, right? You don't want to be in that debt. You don't want to be owing money. You don't want to be borrowing money from the banks. Spend less than what you earn. If you start making more money, start saving more money. Don't start spending more money, right? This is giving you a good opportunity to invest better, invest longer, and start investing when you're young. Ideally, when you're, in your mid-teens, early 20s, and hopefully you can retire when you're 40 or 45, not 65, when you're unable to do the things you love anymore because you're, not in great shape. If you've got a great idea, start your idea today. Don't wait for tomorrow. Even if you're not ready, start today and things will come together. A great book, getting back to books, I think my favorite book of all time, and has nothing to do with Bitcoin. It is called Think and Grow Rich. Check that one out. I'm going to add it into my book list at some point. But Think and Grow Rich, brilliant, and written in, I think, like 1940. But there it is, in plain sight, how to basically become rich. Tony Robbins, the big guru of, success schmuck. He says that Think and Grow Rich is basically his he was inspired by this book, and lots of people that you see out there making their own videos and trying to make money off other people and give them advice and, financial this and they've all based their knowledge on this Think and Grow Rich. I really love it. I've read it about 5 times. A great book. But again, I would start with the Bitcoin Standard just to learn about money before you get into trying to make money. Excellent. Hopefully, folks, you have enjoyed the show. And remember, at CryptoNews Global, you're not only watching or listening to CryptoNews Global, you are CryptoNews Global. So please join me in subscribing if you haven't done so already. And like, comment, and share. And we will see you on the next stream, folks. Thanks so much for joining, and have a good night.